Hello, everyone. I'm Daniel, and I wanted to talk a little bit about my George Barnaby deck that I recently played through the Drowned City and finished up. Actually, I want to talk a little bit about the entire campaign, too. Well, not really. Just at the end of this discussion of the deck itself, I want to talk about those last four scenarios that I didn't get in my first early thoughts about the campaign. Kind of brief, really, just about the finale. But yeah, George Barnaby, so we'll just do the kind of non-spoiler stuff first. George Barnaby is an incredible, incredible investigator, and he takes a lot of thinking and piloting to get this guy right. But I found that once you kind of pay attention a little bit and get the whole shtick, he's very, very strong. That might not be a surprise to most of you. This ability here to do extra card draw even once per phase and then be able to use things that are beneath you is really, really just transparently strong, right? You basically have your hand, which is maybe fairly small, right? Maybe 2 to 5 cards in it, maybe even less than that. But you get to use things out of your boat, as I will call it, the cards that are placed beneath him, and you get to use those primarily if they're skill cards. You can commit other things too, but you would really love to use skill cards that way. And as we'll talk about in a second, with this card, Gift of Nodens, you kind of get to use your discard pile even more, especially when it comes to skill cards. His deck building, kind of to compensate, has a larger number, 35, and you get Survivor 0 to 5, and then actually quite a few level 0 cards from up to 10, actually, from Rogue or Seeker, which actually does a lot. I didn't use this as much as I probably should have, but I'm pretty impressed by that. So let's leave him here. I'm going to talk about the deck in. Let me show you the whole deck right now, up on the screen. And as you can see, there's 64 XP here, which is way too much for this guy. I don't think he needs that much XP to get going. I actually put the versatile in, sorry, at the very end, and just kind of as a joke, because I was like, I don't know what else to do here, and we wanted to play parts 1 and parts 2 pretty quickly, and I didn't have time to think about it. But I also put the observed in. Oh gosh, halfway through. Halfway through, I felt like I was done. So it's just there's a lot here, and survivors just have the unique aspect of not having too many higher level cards to put in. I was trying to avoid putting Grizzled in. I'll talk about that again later, and because I play that card probably too much, but it had to go. All right, let's look at the weaknesses and the special cards. Grim Resolve. This card here lets you basically use a skill card to swap things in and out of the boat. The purpose of that is that sometimes you kind of have to put non-skill cards there. You don't really want to. You really want all the cards to be placed beneath because you want to be able to commit them to be skills. If you commit an event, you just you get the icons, and that's not always bad, but you actually really want the events to be used for their normal purpose, and you don't really double dip on the skills ever, right? The only way to double dip is if you're using a card like Gift of Nodens to recur things from the discard pile. The boat is just like a separate hand. So you want to put the skill cards there because you can kind of still use them, and you want to keep the events and assets in your hand until you're ready to play them, with some exceptions. So I found this signature to be like fine. It's not the kind of signature that you're you know, you're trying to dig for like Min or someone who really has a lot going on with the signature as far as the gameplay. This is just kind of a safety valve. So in case some things happen to get discarded and you didn't really want them in the boat, then you can get them out. It also, like I said, is maybe just an extra 3 cards to make his consistency be a bit worse. Speaking of, uh, with all this stuff in the deck, I was not trying to be the most busted George Barnaby deck you could ever make because I don't usually play that way. I want to explore the card pool a bit, but there were some nice interactions here. Anyway, let's talk about his Cast Adrift, which I think is a pretty rough weakness. It's one you can draw yourself out of, but as you can see here, it basically makes you lose your boat And if you draw this in upkeep, it's especially bad because you're basically losing all of your cards in your hand as well. So that first part I didn't talk about before, but your max hand size is equal to the number of face down cards beneath George Barnaby, limit 5. So if you draw this in upkeep and you have 5 things in the boat and 5 things in your hand, uh-oh. um, so you kind of want to tease this out in the middle of your turn if at all possible. And if you get it early, which I actually often did, it's not horrible because you just sort of, how do I say this? You kind of give up on some of the cards. You feel like some of those cards that you discard from Cast Adrift, or even just ones that go into your boat in the first place, they're not discard fodder, right? Because you want them to be used in that way. But sometimes you're like, you know what? I'm not playing that today. That's okay. We've gotten through our weakness and we can continue playing. But I don't think there's a good way to play around this other than, like I said, if you draw it during upkeep, then it's really bad. If you draw it during your turn, you can still put things into your boat and still keep the cards in your hand. So it's an interesting weakness. I really like it to keep him from just being totally busted. But there's a huge like dance here between keeping things that you want to commit in the boat, just discarding things in general because you want to get the card draw. Because note that his ability is once per phase, so theoretically you can keep discarding stuff, in other phases, and you keep drawing cards. But you can't do this if there are already 5 cards beneath him. So if you fill up the boat and don't commit the cards, then you kind of lose his ability a bit. So I think that he takes quite a bit of time to learn the play patterns to really take the most advantage. But I'm here to report that with 64 XP in the deck, you don't have to play perfectly. In fact, I was probably wasting a lot of those cards that were just stored there because I didn't need them, nor nor did I need to actually use the ability much. I feel like he can do a lot of things regardless. And it could just be the Drowned City also, but I felt that as we'll go through the deck, a lot of the cards that you just play, you're kind of good to go. You don't need to do all of this juggling all the time. Basic weakness was nihilism. It's fine. Survivors are tanky. Okay. So I organized this in terms of, I think, maybe the most interesting stuff. So I have 2 copies of Gift of Nodens, although I didn't get the second copy until late. I think it was actually one of my first upgrades, and it really just allows you to use George's ability during the Mythos phase, if you're probably going to be discarding things during your turn anyway, but allows you to recur those skills. So this is the double dipping you can do. So you can discard a card from your hand, put it in the boat, and then commit it from your boat, and now it's in the discard pile. Want to reuse it? You use this card. You discard something else from your hand, and then you choose a survivor card. And that actually is interesting because there were some non-survivor skills that I thought about putting in the deck, like the Seeker or Rogue ones, and I decided, you know what? I actually just want lots of Rogue cards. Sorry, Survivor cards. And that's because of Resourceful. That's because of this card too. That if you get a non-Survivor card into the discard pile, it's probably not coming back. But all the other things, oh boy, they can come back. So this card allows you to just commit anything in your discard pile as long as it's a survivor skill, and then it goes on the bottom of the deck. I had a way to retrieve those as well, but honestly, just using the cards twice was very, very good. And you drawing a card off of this if you use it, of course, during a different phase that you would otherwise. So I did it in Mythos phase quite a bit, but you can do it during the investigator phase too. I found the problem with this card is just that you are trying to juggle his ability, and you're like, well, I already discarded something this phase. Do I really want to use this? And using it out of the phase, I think, is fairly easy. And again, it's only skill tests that you perform, so you can't use this to help other people, but you can commit things from beneath you to other people's skill tests. So sometimes you even do discard skills just to put them in the boat. Sometimes you discard cards that are as you'll see, the winging its and improvised weapons just to get them in the discard pile. So that can be okay if you to discard more than one thing per round. This card I think is incredible in George. Makes sense. Would be really good in Patrice. It needs to be in investigators who can draw a lot because you do run out of cards in your hand to fuel this ability. You can run something like Glimmer of Hope to do that. I didn't do it, but you could just to give yourself a little bit more fodder. But again, in order for George to use his ability, you need to discard a card to put it underneath his card. And you don't want to do that with the improvised cards because those don't have any icons, so you don't want them stuck in the boat. All right, let's look at the skills. I wanted to put as many skills as I could, and actually, I probably failed in that remark. Okay, we have 2 copies of Resourceful. Just a survivor staple gets you anything out of the discard pile. And, those 3 skills are things that I could test all the time. 2 copies of Grizzled. As I said before, I did not really want to put Grizzled in this deck. I have played that card way too much. And yet I just kind of had to. It's so much XP. I don't remember how many checkboxes are on here, but it's the always prepared, so you return it to your hand when you draw something. I only got this in the last couple of scenarios, and it didn't trigger that much, but +3 for fighting an elite monster or dealing with a terror treachery, of course, is excellent. So, 3 icons is just really good. Strength in Numbers is a really cheap card for basically a +2, so an Unexpected Courage at base. But again, it is a card you can commit from your discard pile with Gift of Nodens, and it's a card that you just get. I don't know how do I explain this. It's just some value when you need to commit something because you want to hit the breakpoints in the bag. You have this. It only costs you 1 XP, but once you get a few other classes in play, it gets to be incredible. So I had Scroll of Secrets in here. I had the Protective Gear, right? And that's 3 more classes right there. And now you get +4. And this is a incredible, that's a +4 to the 1, right? So it's a 5 wild icon skill. Needs a little bit of setup. I also had well, you'll see it later. I had a way of getting other things into play, but that was mostly just for a joke. Okay, Last Chance. This card is incredible as well. 2 copies here. Actually didn't see it in the last scenario because the scenarios ended up being, well, I'll talk about it later. But this is just a lot of cards, or sorry, a lot of skill icons, and you just are rewarded for not having so many cards in hand. And that's kind of what George wants to do. And you get to draw back to refill your hand. And again, you often overdraw and just discard stuff in the upkeep phase, and that's fine. You're like, I'll get them back later. So that's those. It also is really nice for dealing with Cast Adrift if you ever happen to be able to get it back, right? I think adding some extra card draw into George is not a problem. Okay, we've got Contemplative, and there's 2 copies of this. Where is it? Uh-oh. Here we go. 2 copies. And Long Shot. And these 2 cards go together, I think, very well. This is your Deduction and Vicious Blow equivalent, and they help out the whole team. You get to commit them from your location, and you can commit them from your location to a connecting location. So if someone else is a fighter and you want them to do 3 damage, great, Long Shot. If you want someone else to investigate, even though I was mostly doing that, Contemplative. I will note that when I played this deck, and I'll talk about this more when I talk about the end of the campaign a bit, this was a 3-player team. Michael McGlenn and Lucius Galloway were the other 2. Very, very strong investigators, in my opinion. George was a nice compliment. I originally went in being quote-unquote the flex, but ended up being, still a flex. It's just that survivors can do anything, man. Look at all of these icons. You can pass any test. You can deal damage. You're going to see some more damage in a second. Evading wasn't really what I needed to do, and wasn't super necessary when we had a Lucius who wanted to. evade anyway, and a Michael McGlenn who could just blow any enemy out of the water in their turn. So these were cards that were really easy to recur. They don't give you any icons, but you know what I do have lots of? Icons. And survivors have other ways of just passing tests. So this is the missing like deduction vicious blow that survivor has not had. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute. What else do you really need here? I got some assets, right? I have some assets that help this get a little bit even more crazy, but I don't know. I mean, these cards compared to like deduction, right? So I could take deduction, but I feel like because these are already red cards and I can recur them better, that I never even thought about deduction. Okay, let's look at some other assets then. So if this one was a specialist card that I think is really, really nice for George, because one thing I'm missing here is some kind of extra action ability. I mean, getting the compression with clues and damage is good, but being able to move around the map is necessary. So this lets you, only during your turn, but you can discard a card from your hand and move. This is strong. I should have had 2 copies. I should have got it earlier. I didn't, because I was more concerned about the nautical charts. I was very fortunate to draw this in almost all of my opening hands, but this essentially turns every card in your hand into an extra clue. Once per round. But you know what? In 3-player, you can like discard contemplative, put it in your boat, and then commit contemplative to get yourselves 4 clues in basically 2 actions. Kind of gross. But even so, you could use the contemplative on the nautical charts and just get 3 at once, and that's really strong. I never used this ability when it was in my hand. I kind of probably forgot about this. I had hand hooked in my deck to a certain point and never used it. I think my hand slots were already full and damage was not particularly necessary. Allies. 2 copies of Lawrence, 1 copy of Granny Orrin. Let's look at Lawrence if you have not seen him before. +1 intellect. George has 4. This gets you to 5. 5 is a strong number, but 6 is better with nautical charts. And those icons that are not on contemplative and long shot start to matter less, right? There's no icons on these guys when you have other stat boosts in play. Granny Orrin, 1 copy. I did have a charisma as well, and she's really nice because she lets you not have to go up 4. Playing standard difficulty, 3-player, it does change a little bit of my perceptions of this campaign, but this is just, say, go up 3. Up 3 is fine. And most of the time, you'll pass. And if not, you pass anyway. It's interesting, that 2 willpower, none of us were particularly strong on willpower, but with Granny and Plucky in play, and tons of resources that Lawrence gives you, you just pass those tests. You can do it. Not a Dark Horse deck, but possibly could be. Now, to protect the Plucky, I ran protective gear. I noticed a lot of hazards in this campaign halfway through, and occasionally I thought this was a fine way to deal with that problem. But as you can see, multi-class card for the strength in numbers. It didn't feel expensive. I played it often. I actually have a special way to play it. You'll see it in a second. 2 copies of Scroll of Secrets. So this has the sort of disgusting interaction with the Gifted Nodens, right? Because Gifted Nodens puts the card on the bottom of your deck. This is the tabooed version, right? For no action, you get to exhaust this and pull something from the bottom of your deck. I actually didn't do this as much as you might think. I didn't need to. There were a few scenarios that were long enough where I could set up and just do it, but it was not always required. I kept them because they're good and they did the trick, but it was not always necessary. Again, 64 XP in the deck. There's lots of other tricks. Nothing left to lose. 2 copies. I talked about this card in the video that released yesterday, the Dream Eaters retrospective video. This card is extremely good in George. You play all your stuff, or you get down to a low number of cards in hand. Maybe you dump your resources into a plucky test, and then you get a full meta cards again. So we're looking at events now, but I just thought that all of these kind of go together because of the discard synergy and plucky. The rest of the stuff is a little different. So let's move it off camera a bit. I had 2 copies of Act of Desperation for the entire campaign because I thought I might need to fight a bit more. And they were kind of just here. They could have gone. I used them a few times to good effect. It's a fun card. There's versions of this in the Drowned City for getting clues, but I didn't, or evading. I didn't think I needed that. I think this was just perfectly fine. Sometimes I did throw away the nautical charts and maybe played a new one. But about 3/4 through the campaign, or maybe a little bit more than that, my friend said, you know what? Just put in the most fun thing you can think of, because I felt like the deck was already done. Again, putting Observed in your deck after there was like maybe 20 XP into it is a little silly, because I felt like we were just getting everything done. And he said, just put the most fun thing in. And the problem is Survivor doesn't have a whole lot of stuff to upgrade into that really makes a difference. So there's some cool events, but I don't think you can hold on to too much in George. So I decided, how about an old hunting rifle? I'm a big fan of this card. I think it is good. It's got a downside, but it's got enough of an upside and it's cheap that I made it work. I didn't play it that much, but I did 9 damage and that was kind of fun. It takes up 2 hand slots, but you'll see a fix for that in a second. I mean, I just think that the card is kind of a fun thing to do, and 1 card for 9 damage over 4 actions really, is pretty good. You'd think that with base 3, that's not good enough, but it actually is. 2 copies of Winging It should not be surprising. I often forgot this was in the discard pile because I had so many other ways to get clues. But, it's 1 resource, 2 clues from the discard pile. Good fodder for discard. Hard not to include. But I was more impressed with Improvised Weapon. This is a card that came out in Drowned City as well. I tried as best I could to do stuff that was more recent in terms of the card pool, not to go too crazy. There's a few things there, right? The Scroll of Secrets, the Act of Desperation, a Circle Undone, Forgotten Age for Old Hunting Rifle. But yeah, the Improvised Weapon here is the upgrade gives it the enemy -2 fight instead of -1, and it draws you a card after you play it from your discard pile. It's nice. Again, to pull this and then also use from the discard pile the long shot made this a nice 3 damage attack when you didn't have anything else in play. I can't stress this enough. Yes, the old hunting rifle was fun, but if you are mostly getting clues, the events in your hand or in your discard pile in this sense are really good for doing the other emergencies. Fighting, again, I didn't need to evade, but fighting is definitely one of those. It's like, oh, here is an emergency 2 or maybe 3 damage. I really liked that card. I think the extra draw makes it really nice too. Okay, salvage. This was a way to just play something from the discard pile, and sometimes things got randomly discarded. Sometimes I just wanted to get rid of them and then just play it from the discard pile anyway. I found this to be a strong card, even though I played it maybe like twice. I was impressed with this. I've never played it before. I never figured that it would actually be relevant, but I think it was extremely relevant in this deck because of how often things entered the discard pile without me really wanting them there. So this was a nice addition. It wasn't like a plan to keep using it. It was just a plan to be like, hey, I can't hold on to this protective gear, but I really want to play it. Or even if it gets defeated, just play it again. Okay, the rest of the stuff is just kind of random weird things that I probably, with the Versatile, probably didn't need these. I could have gotten rid of them. The Yomi ones were just kind of a joke. I wanted to be able to play something from someone else's hand. Maybe to steal a gun from Michael, which happened only once, I think. Maybe to help someone else play a card, like an event to reload guns, maybe reload secrets onto stuff that Lucius had, and I had like an extra action and they didn't. Helps draw cards anyway. I think it's just a fun card to play, but this was not the team for it. I mean, we could build around it better in the future. I just think it's fun to have a card like this. It had relevant icons for me to just commit. But in a better deck, I probably would have given up on that much, much earlier and said, you know what, I wasn't actually doing that. Okay, Alter Fate is not a random thing, but it's just in this pile of the last few cards here. This card was really stupid good, as you might imagine, when you can recur it with Resourceful, right? I played this, got rid of some treachery, and then it was in the discard pile. I immediately took another test, committed Resourceful from my discard pile, pulled this back, played it again. Cards just kind of nutty. And then you can pick up Resourceful again with your Scroll of Secrets. A fast card that you can essentially recur was a little nonsense. I only really got use out of it in one scenario. I didn't find the treacheries to be too worth it. But, I think in other campaigns it might be really good. Okay, Arcane Enlightenment. This was to help increase the hand size, but also allow me to hold the nautical charts and something else. If I had pulled a gun out, played the hunting rifle, nautical charts is a tome, so is Scroll of Secrets. So I think this is a reasonable card. Staying Together I added with Versatile. I just couldn't think of anything in the 5 minutes I had to change my deck. It's fine. And then Preposterous Sketches, you can take this natively just to draw cards. I thought, I basically always had clues around. It wasn't a big deal to play this, but it's a nice way to just play a card, draw 3, and be kind of back up to your 3 or 4 cards that you need in hand, and then start getting going that way. I think I had 2 at the beginning of the campaign. I really do believe that, this is a fine card. The 2 costs didn't matter here at all. But people who played Deep Knowledge at a Crossroads would have been fine here too. That all works. But for 0 XP and just saying this is an upgrade is not going to do much different. It was good. Plus it has icons that I could use. That's the deck. Honestly, it went so well that now, I would change some things. I would have added a little bit more consistency, but halfway through, we were just doing so well in this campaign that I didn't feel like it was so necessary to be try hard. I didn't need to do extra. The George Barnaby problem, I think, is just getting used to the playstyle, figuring out how many cards you want to put underneath him when you draw your opening hand. Basically, it was just all skills. You just say, hey, I've got 3 skills in hand, put them all there. Sometimes you had to make some other decisions because you wanted to not lose anything in upkeep, right? So if you had 3 under you, or even 2 under you, right, you could draw, depending on how many things you play, right? You draw, put 1 there, draw another card. It's just a little bit of a finagling of that ability. So that's kind of all I want to talk about with him. I think Survivors did very well in this cycle because they can just do a lot more than they probably could have before, especially with the nautical charts and contemplative. They still have a problem where there's not a good capstone other than Gift of Nodens. Gift of Nodens is good, but I don't think it allows you to do as good as the rest of the deck is, which, was really good. But if you think about high XP cards in other classes, some of those things actually let you do things on their own. Runic Axe is a busted card, but think about it is the one that does the healing. It's the one that gets you clues. Antikythera, right? That card is the Seeker capstone to a lot of things, and it by itself doesn't help you succeed on skill tests, but it will help you move the game state along a lot more. And we don't really have that here with Gift of Nodens, but it basically lets you use your whole discard pile, your hand, and your boat as areas to pull from, and that's really good as long as the rest of your cards are there. So I think having the extra movement from Bound for the Horizon, having some extra damage on tap, I didn't feel like I was going to die ever because of the cards I had there. So I don't know. What else does Survivor need? And a way to get extra actions. I could have put Leo DeLuca in that level 0 deck, and it might not have been a bad idea. Other ways to get extra actions, you can get them in, other level 0 rogue cards, right? Swift Reflexes, Quick Thinking, but I was hesitant to put other kinds of cards like that were not just survivor skills. So I don't know. We'll see if we get anything more, but I really think that survivor is missing a bit of the extra action, but they make up for it with a ton of consistency um, and survivability, right? I mean, that's the name of the class, but they're very resilient to basically anything the Mythos hands you. So let me talk about the last few scenarios of the campaign now. So spoiler territory. George Barnaby, great investigator. Play him if you haven't. It's a nice learning experience, I would say, too. So last time I talked to you, I had played all of the scenarios, again, going east, 3-player, standard difficulty, Lucius, Michael, George. Had played everything in Aurelia except for these 2 scenarios. So first it was the Drowned Quarter. This was an optional scenario, although I don't know why you wouldn't play it. And then the Western Wall was the next one. Okay, I enjoyed both of these scenarios. I found them a bit on the easier side going east, although I think most of the campaign is fairly easy going east anyway. But the Drowned Quarter itself was fun. I mean, it's the scenario where you're going around trying to unflood different locations, and then they keep, rising the water on you anyway. So a little bit of puzzle. We had a little bit of a problem because our Lucius just ran around and revealed all the locations, and then suddenly all the shroud values were high. It was kind of funny, but it made it a little bit of a challenge to get things going there. That scenario, I believe, has a Shroud 4 location on your starting location. I've now played both of these scenarios going the other direction, and strangely, they're not much different. So for a scenario 6 and 7, these scenarios were not too bad. For scenarios 2 and 3, they are harder. I've also replayed these with 2-player. That's different too. Anyway, Western, I enjoyed it. I think it was fun. It wasn't hard, but it was in a fun scenario to play. Western Wall is a similar scenario. Again, both of these have you unflood locations by spending clues. I actually quite a bit enjoyed the Western Wall. It was also kind of easy, but it was a fun mechanical scenario where you're scaling the wall going west, but you're going down the wall going east. No, other way around. Going east, we're going down the wall. Is that right? No. Going east, we were going up the wall, and down the wall going west. I enjoyed them. I thought I even though they were mechanically somewhat similar, I enjoyed them much more than Court of the Ancients and the Grand Vault that also felt pretty samey. I just thought these were more fun. Okay. Which brings us to the finale. After we finished this, we all had 7 progress on our tasks and got 7 more XP for completing our tasks, and we got our task flipped, which is really strong. We go back to Arkham, and there's 2 parts. The first part is the Doom of Arkham Part 1, and I don't think I have much out here for that other than, I guess I have this. You're playing basically a variant of the Blood on the Altar from the Dungeon Legacy. That's the one where you go around and you try to reveal encounter cards from beneath locations after you've cleared clues off of them, and you're looking for the hidden key or the key to the chamber and the hidden chamber, whatever they're called. This one's pretty much the same idea. You're looking for this Tillinghast Esoterica shop, and it's underneath one of the main Arkham locations that you're so used to. The downtown, Misconduct University, all those. It's underneath one. We had a hard time with this one because the encounter deck actually had tons of enemies, which I thought was really good. And there's, I want to say it's 6 locations to check, and we had to check 5. And spending clues every time took us a while. I thought the scenario was fun. It might be kind of bad if you get it on your first shot. Scaling in this campaign is a little odd to me. I don't think it's quite there. So I found this scenario to be good because it was a longer scenario for us because we had to go around, get a bunch of clues. We needed to spend a bunch of clues once we were here to pick up our artifacts again. And that made it kind of interesting and enjoyable. Turns out a long shot coupled with a old hunting rifle just kills some of those deep one enemies. but there were a lot of them. So I thought that was kind of a good scenario. And then we get to part two, and I do like that they made this into two parts. And this is where the Cthulhu board comes into play. So you play with these cards on it to start. This is the wings and the claw. And what you do, I'll just pick this up so you can see it a little bit better, is you have to evade or fight the enemies, and then they flip. This is basically the whole scenario, is that you're trying to defeat them, they come back from victory display, and then the amount of HP and the fight values scales basically every time you do this, after you wipe the board. That is the whole scenario, pretty much. Because there wasn't much going on. It is a scenario in which you are supposed to defeat Cthulhu, and I thought that the theming of the scenario was incredible. It is a set piece that is memorable. You have the big enemy that has these multiple parts, and it reminds me of some really classic video games where you have different parts to defeat. Different things happen when you flip these for the first time. I won't talk about that too much, but once you get the pattern, as it were, then you can kind of game it a bit, which is the point. But you keep doing this, and then you continue to, well, I'll tell you what happens next in a second. But Cthulhu's in one location, and he's trying to flood locations, and then he moves and ruins locations. And this happens every 3 rounds. What a cool idea. You can run up to the rooftops and avoid him, and then you can fight him from up there, which I think was a cool idea. The problem is it just didn't do much. I feel like that's the problem with this campaign. This scenario in particular is it felt easy, and easy isn't a problem. What it felt like is that most of this time, the effects of the encounter cards or the Cthulhu deck, which is here, didn't do anything. And you don't really want, as a designer, I suspect, their players to just say, well, the mechanics just whiffed. And I want to say like 80% of the time that we drew from this deck. So at the end of the enemy phase, he floods a location that he's at, or increases the flood level, and then you draw the top card of the Cthulhu deck. So this one says, if there are no Cthulhu enemies in the victory display, discard this, and you draw the next one. Okay. And if you do have a Cthulhu enemy in the victory display, then you test willpower X, where it's Cthulhu's rage. If you fail, you choose a Cthulhu enemy in the victory display and return it to the board in rage side face up. So you got to fight it again. When we drew this, it was the very beginning. I think we had one thing into the victory display, but Cthulhu's rage was 1. I think we chose me. I think I had a willpower of like 3 or 4 at that point, and I passed the test. It's gone forever. There's only one of these. Here's another one. If there are no investigators at Cthulhu's location, discard this card and draw the top card. Great. Often you cannot just be at his location. And this one says draw a new one. This is kind of a search. Fine. But sometimes we've got things like, if these versions, so the 3 different parts of his of the enemy are in play, then something happens. If nothing is in play, which can happen because we're going through this so quickly, then nothing happens. I'm not going to go through all of these. Some of these are just draw another one. Again, if these things are in play, but they're a lot of the things that happen as an effect, like this one, if Hoary Wings is in play, each investigator at Cthulhu's location discards 1 card from hand at random. First off, that's not so bad, but you don't need to be at his location to fight. Or even maybe just don't end your turn at the location. He doesn't do attacks opportunity on the board. You can just walk out. Staying in fully flooded locations means that you just take a damage or horror, I believe. You can go to the rooftops and sit there. Most of these things do very little, and only do these difficulty tests go up if you're at the end of the scenario. But the reality is, you need to do this just a few times. This is X is 1 at the very beginning, then it's 2, then it's 3. And we had the version where, that's 3-player, by the way, so they start at 1. We had the version where once you get to 3, you change the whole act deck and you just defeat them. And they are 5s across the board. So 15 health, 5 fight, 5 evade, and then you need to go spend clues, and that's the end of the scenario. This took us, that's just not very much, right? They actually don't ever attack you if you're at not the location. We had a Michael McGlenn with sawed-off shotgun. It's a fun, it is a fun experience. I do not want to discount this, that if you want to sit there with your shotgun and shoot something, you can do it. And it's cool. I think, again, the set piece is incredible, and it really lets you do your thing. Compared to, say, the last campaign, Feast of Hemlock Vale, which basically said, hi, you do not get to play your character for a little bit, and you're going to lose lots of random cards, and you're not going to have fun. This is on the easier side, and you're going to have a lot of fun. My problem with it is that it felt like most of the effects of the encounter deck and this Cthulhu deck did nothing. I want to say 80 to 90% of the time, because we were so efficient. I think we played 10 or 11 rounds. We had only one extra location become ruined because the first agenda, only flipped once. It is not that hard to deal a bunch of damage at this point in the campaign. So even when you get to that next act where you're supposed to spend clues and drop your artifacts, that wasn't too difficult because you could get rid of these guys and they're not coming back after you draw that other one that we saw already. And he doesn't move or flood locations anymore. So I feel like there was something missing here. Something missing that we felt like, did we do it right? And I'm pretty sure we did. We may have missed a few things, but it felt like the game wasn't really playing. We were the only ones really playing. And looking at the special cards from this encounter set, I guess I've mixed in the Agents of Cthulhu from the core set. These were the only 2 enemies in the deck. Just those 2. There are other cards in the deck I didn't put in here, but these are the 4 that get added. These are just the encounter cards that are special to this particular scenario. I don't think we saw them all that much. I don't think we saw this. Maybe we did, and if we did, maybe we passed, or like the top card of the Cthulhu deck didn't do anything. I mean, this one is just 1 direct horror and discard 1 card. Doesn't really matter too much. This one is just take 2 damage. Again, only at the very end is Cthulhu's Rage like 5. And this is a fine card. I mean, we have lots of finales that have take a tough test, take 2 damage. If you fail, that's fine. But I think that this card, which there's 2 copies of, is like strangely underpowered. You must decide, place 1 Doom on the current agenda, increase the flood level of your location, which you sometimes can't do because that is at, if you're on the rooftops, you can't do that. Or each investigator takes 1 damage or 1 horror. Do you remember Innsmouth Conspiracy that has, I think it's Syzygy, which is like this? It's everyone loses 3 resources, ouch. Everyone takes 2 horror, ouch. Or place 1 Doom on the current agenda. This one, why would you not just always choose the last option? 1 damage or 1 horror, your choice. Yeah, and there's just one of those. Just one of those. It's not that bad. So that's kind of my feelings on the end of this campaign, maybe the whole campaign in general. Beginner friendly. It's good to feel like you can beat this campaign, but I don't think it's as good when you feel like the game wasn't really participating. And maybe we were just too good. Full card pool, 3-player. The scaling is a little strange. In 2-player, you're doing nearly as much damage, I believe. We had to do 33, I think that's how much it was, damage. I think in 2-player, you need to do something like 27. Don't quote me on the numbers. I'll look that up later. But it felt like the scaling here, in 4-player, you lose an extra round, but it's the same amount of damage as in 3-player. That's just a little bit too friendly to the players, in my opinion. But it's not that. It's that most of the effects didn't happen. Most of these effects didn't happen because we could remove these from play fairly quickly. Most of his ability didn't happen because we didn't need to be at the location. And yeah, I mean, that's just not, in my opinion, great for a finale. There needs to be some. I want a finale where I'm almost dead, right? I wanted to have a bunch of damage and horror on me, and that just didn't happen. Maybe there's just a few things that need to change. Like he needs to keep being able to move and flood locations in that last act. Maybe the numbers just need to scale a little bit higher. Maybe I need to play with a worse card pool. Maybe 2-player solo will be a lot harder and maybe more interesting. But for 3-player, it felt very anticlimactic. And it's not the only finale that has been that way, right? In Innsmouth itself, the other Cthulhu kind of Cthulhu themed campaigns, the other one that has Agents of Cthulhu, it's similar where it's a pretty chill finale. I even think the Forgotten Age has a pretty chill finale, and yeah, I mean it's difficult. Again, scaling to player count, scaling to difficulty in this game is extremely challenging. So I don't have a problem with them having different difficulties for different campaigns. Some of them should be easier. Some of them should be more straightforward and less complex for, especially for people who are just getting into the game. I agree with all of that. I think that is 100% fine. What I like less is that I felt like I sleeved a bunch of cards over here that had no impact on the game. And maybe they would have had impact if we weren't so good at eliminating these guys from the board. That's fair. But as it is, that wasn't the case. Okay, again. I don't want to like be negative about this campaign because I'm not. I think it overall was a fun campaign. I don't think it's among my favorites, but I think it's a fun one to play because you get to do your thing. You get to play your deck. You get to do, and this is good. It was a good time for George because even a lot of these effects that say discard a card, you're like, who cares? But I think most investigators get to play their deck. They get to tell their story. They get to do the task that changes the gameplay pattern a bit. I'm looking forward, before I have real review thoughts on the whole thing, I do want to play this multiple times going the other direction and playing on 2-player, which I'm in the middle of. So I want to give fuller thoughts later. But I don't think this part is visibly different. I think the player count scaling on this is going to be noticeable, but I can see that already. I just want to play it. When I've done 2-player already with this campaign, it has felt harder, mostly because there's victory point enemies that you don't always draw, but sometimes the scaling just seems a bit off. So I think the difficulty is maybe about right for 2-player. Could be about right. But for some reason, in 3 and 4-player, it's just easier. And that's always the case, that it's easier. But I find that usually 3 or 4-player have some other sort of, it's weird that there's no scaling on the health here. I mean, there kind of is in some way. But to me, it's that the difficulty is about right in 2-player, and 3 and 4-player is easier. Whereas in other campaigns, the difficulty in 1 and 2-player is harder, and 3 and 4-player is about right. All right, I'm gonna be done for now. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you learned a little bit about the George deck and kind of my thoughts there, and then just some analysis on the cards here. I'm looking forward to playing this one again. Again, I think Arkham is all about replaying campaigns, but your first playthrough is important because that often is someone's only playthrough. And I think they'll have a fun time defeating Cthulhu, but maybe wonder if they missed something because there's something a bit off here.